Hi there, and welcome back to another Unreal Engine tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about basic switches that cause something to happen elsewhere in your level. This is a fairly simple thing to do, but when I was first starting out in Unreal, I had no idea how to do it, and I ended up using level sequences to do things that really should have just been done with blueprints. So, in an effort to maybe save someone else from all that pain and suffering, we're just going to learn about a basic customizable switch that you can replicate and parent to a lot of different things so that it's can be used for doors, for lights, for really anything you need it to do. So let's get started. So starting off, open up our content drawer. I've created in the content folder a folder called Interactables and then one called Switch. So we're going to need three things starting off. I need a blueprint called Switch. And then we're going to need a second blueprint called, let's just call it Switched. Probably could come up with a better name than that, but that will be the object that the switch acts upon. And then we need an interface. So that is under Blueprint, Blueprint Interface. I'm going to call that BPI Switch Interface. So let's start with our interface. Open this up. And we will need, I think, just one function, but we may need another one later on. We'll see. Call this function activate switch. You could do this with casting, but I like to avoid casting whenever possible because it consumes a lot more memory and is more expensive for the game to perform that operation than just using interfaces. Interfaces are a little confusing at the beginning, but once you play around with them enough, they become second nature. So for our activate switch function, all we need is a boolean, and we're going to call that used. Okay, so that's good, and we can close that for now. So now let's open up BP switched, not switch, switched. We don't need to add any components to this because this is going to be a parent blueprint, and we'll create our door or light or whatever that needs to be switched later on. So in our event graph, let's create a few things. I'm going to create a custom event, call that update. And then a second custom event, call that finished. Update and finished are going to correspond with a timeline component on the switch blueprint. Each of these needs two things. Needs two inputs. So let's add the first one. That's going to be an enum timeline, or no, e-timeline. Yeah, needs e-timeline direction. We're just going to call that direction. Then it needs a float. We'll call that alpha. And the same goes for finished. And I think that's good for now. So back in so let's compile that and save it. Back in, now we're going to go to BP switch. So we'll need a few things. First, or a few components. First, let's add a static mesh. You can call that whatever you want. That'll just be the switch object. And then we need a box collision so that we know if the player is standing within range of the switch. Open up our event graph. And first, we're going to open up class settings. And then over here on the right, we're going to add a new interface, and that's going to be our BPI switch interface. So now you can see that our activate switch function has appeared over here on the left plane. In here, actually before we do that, let's create a couple of functions. Custom event. So first one is going to be update. And it's going to mirror our switched blueprint. So let's get it the direction and alpha nodes, and then we can just duplicate it with Command D on a Control D on Unreal 5 or Control W on Unreal 4, and we can just call that finished now, and that will resolve that error. Then let's create some variables. First one we'll call single use, and that will be used if you want the switch to only work once and then never again. Then expose that variable to the editor by clicking the eye icon. Second one we're going to call used. It does not need to be exposed. And then a third one called reverse, and it does not need to be exposed either. So in our activate switch function that we inherited from the interface, double click that. From here we're going to drag this out, get our trigger. Or did we not do that? Oh, we didn't do that, sorry. We need one more function. So let's create a custom event, call it trigger. It does not need any additional input pins. Let's go to activate switch. And then we are just going to call that function. And then I'm going to pull out used. And single use, we're going to set used with single use. And then we're going to get that and put that in the return node. So this is what your interface function on BP switch should look like. So let's go back. So now we need to get a new variable on the right, and that is going to be our target. Drag this up to the top of this list, and we're going to expose this variable also, and it needs to be of the type BP switched. So this is going to be the thing that the switch will be acting on. Now from here, on the update function, we're going to drag this out, update, and you're going to want to select update parentheses target. So that's getting the update function from the other blueprint. And as you can see, it's already connected target from our left side there. Then just connect up the direction to the direction and the alpha to the alpha. Duplicate this with Control D and hook these up to each other. Okay. So let's get to the actual triggering of the switch. So first we're going to need to add a timeline. You can just call that timeline. And then we need a new macro. And this is just going to be able to this macro is going to handle toggling the switch back and forth if you want it to not be a single-use switch. So we're going to call this direction toggle. And for our inputs, we're going to need an execute. We can just call that execute. And then another input, we're going to call that a timeline component. And just call it timeline. Okay, so we're going to validate this by getting isValid and select the one with the question mark. They're really the same thing, just this is a macro and the other is a function, and the macro just lets you branch off like this. So connect our execute pins. From isValid, we're going to create a new branch. We're going to connect single use to that. From true on the single use branch, we're going to get another branch that is going to connect to used. From there, or from false on the used branch, we're going to create a new branch, call that, or that is going to connect to reverse. Then from true on that, we're going to create a branch, and from false we're going to create another branch. Okay, so back at the single use branch, from false we're going to create a new branch, connect that to reverse as well. Yeah, let's get a reroute node just to make it look nice and clean. From true, we're going to connect that to the bottom branch that we haven't declared the condition for yet. And from false, we're going to connect that to the top condition. And from there, false on the top branch will connect to our output. We'll call that play forward. And false from the bottom branch will connect to a new execute pin. We'll call that play reverse. Then from our timeline input we got way back here, we're going to drag this out, is playing. Then that will connect to these two branches. And I'll zoom out here so that you can see what the whole thing should look like. Yeah, so basically this is just going to toggle the switch on and off. And the isPlaying function will make sure that the switch can't be activated while your animation is running, so it doesn't bug out or anything if somebody presses the switch too early. So back in our event graph, from trigger, we're going to pull out a do once node. Now we're going to pull out our direction toggle macro. We're going to grab timeline from our components list, connect that to timeline. Then play forward will connect to play from start, and play reverse will connect to reverse from end. Now update, we're going to connect an event called update, and this should be the update from this blueprint. So it should say underneath update target is BP switch, as opposed to this one which says target is BP switched. So in finished, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to get the finished function, and again, it should be from BP switch. Going to connect direction to direction on both of those. Then we need to add a float track. So double click on your timeline, click the track button, add float track. Let's call this alpha. And so you can change this however you would like, but I'm just going for a nice smooth opening. So we're going to add a float key point at 0, 0 for time and value. I'm going to add another one, and we're going to set its time to 3 and its value to 3. Then select both of these by clicking and dragging, right click, and then just for key interpolation, press auto. That'll give us a nice smooth fluid movement. And then make sure you trim the timeline so that you don't have any unused space here. So just tap on length, set that to 3. Save, compile that. Let's go back to our event graph. And then just a few more things, I think. So from alpha, we're going to connect that to both of these functions. And then from finished, we're going to get a new branch. And we're going to get used and connect to that. Don't need anything from true, but from false, we're actually going to set reversed. Now we're going to get reverse, and then a not operator, or excuse me, not equal. You want a not Boolean, so that's going to invert the reverse. Getting a little double negative here. And then connect that not Boolean to the set reverse Boolean. Then we're going to reroute this, drag this all the way back to reset. Pull this out, and you can align these however you would like. Yeah, good enough. Okay. So let's make our static mesh something that we can actually see. I'll just make it a cone. Don't want it to be too big. Well, yeah. And then let's stretch our box to be a little bit larger. You would actually use box extend for this, but since this is quick and dirty, we'll just do it this way. Let's actually make it 3 on all sides. So let's pull out our switch right there. Now we're not going to pull out our switched blueprint because, as you can see, if we do that, there's nothing there to switch. So what we're going to do, because this is our parent switch, and it's going to act upon child switches. So what this allows you to do is reuse the same blueprint for multiple types of switches. So whether that's turning on a light, opening a door, I don't know, what else do switches do? Activating death fans, whatever. So let's right-click switch. We're going to create a child blueprint class, and we'll call this BP door. Now, in door, let's create let's create a cylinder. Now let's create a cube. And the cube, let's set its Y scale to 0.1. And move it up so that it's resting on the ground like so. Before we get to our event graph, we're going to open up our construction script. I don't think we need to call our parent function on the construction script, but if we do, you can just bring that node back by right-clicking construction script and add call to parent function. But like I said, I don't think we'll need it. Let's drag this out, branch, and from here we're going to drag this out and we're going to get start reversed. Now, but we haven't actually created that variable. So we needed to add one more Boolean to our switched so this condition we haven't actually created yet. So let's go back to our switched blueprint. Sorry, I'm a little bit all over the place here, and let's create a couple of Booleans. So first we're going to create one called single use, and that will allow us to make this usable only once. I'm going to expose that variable. Create a new one called start reversed. Also does what its name implies. Create a new one called used, and another one called reverse. Let's compile that. So back in our door blueprint, from the branch we created in our construction script, we're going to pull that out and we are going to get start reversed. And the reason this is here is because this is a child blueprint of our parent blueprint, which is BP switched. So it inherits all the variables and functions from this blueprint. So from true, we're going to set reverse, again inheriting from our parent. Duplicate that, connect this to false, and then uncheck reverse. Now let's drag this out, set relative location of our cube component, and duplicate this and connect it back here. And then let's promote this location to a variable. We're going to call that target location. And we will leave it connected only to the top construction script graph. Then our event graph, we can get rid of these. So on event begin play, actually we don't need that either. Okay, so let's get update. Nope. So we actually want event update, and that is calling our parent event. From our execute pin, we're going to set relative location of our cube. Yeah, so then we're just going to grab our target location and going to multiply that. Sorry. Going to multiply it. Oh, right. And I believe you should be able to connect this to alpha, even though they're different types of pins, yeah. And then we're just going to connect this to our new location. And so the target location is where you want the door to slide open to. And the alpha will simply be a value between 0 and 1. So at 1 means that it will be fully at the location you intend it to be at. Okay, I think that's good. Well, let's try it out and see how this works, or if this works. Let's pull out our door. Then, we need to actually expose the target location on the door blueprint. To our target location, let's make it 100 away. Then our switch, need to target the door. Okay, so let's see what happens. Actually, I know this isn't going to work because we haven't added anything to our player character yet. So, okay, where? Okay. So you can find your third-person character underneath content, third person, blueprints, third person character. We're going to add a new going to add an event called begin overlap. Whoops. Or actor begin overlap. From here, on our other actor, we're going to pull out does implement interface. The interface is BP switch interface. If it implements the interface, we're just going to promote that to a variable. We'll call that in activation zone. And then we will also create something called event end overlap. And we'll just duplicate does implement interface. And then again, we'll just promote that to that. Actually, yeah, so that should be good. So you need these two functions doing these two things. So now we're going to need a method for the actor to, or for the player to actually activate the switch. So let's go up to Edit, Project Settings. And then we're going to do Enhanced Input over on the left. So then we're going to, on our first choice here, we're going to press the Add Element button, expand this, and in this project, a input mapping context has already been created for us. So we're going to select that. Let's browse to it. And it's just in the third person folder under Input. Let's expand our mappings. We already have Jump, Move, and Look, but let's create another one. So create new asset. Going to put that under third person input actions. Call it IA action. And we'll just make this a mouse click, a left mouse click. So you can just click on this and then click, and it will automatically select left mouse button for you. Let's see. Yeah, so let's just make this a pressed trigger. Each of these does something slightly different, but I think press should be okay for what we're doing here. I don't believe we need any modifiers. No, I don't think so. So we'll save that. Let's go back into our character. Now we'll be able to right click, and we should be able to bring up Enhanced Input Action, IA Action. So from there, let's just test to make sure it works. So from trigger, let's pull out a print string that says hello, compile it, and as you can see, as I click, it prints hello. Great. So now we have this action. We need to tell our switch to activate. Let's pull this out, and did I call it trigger? What did I call it? I called it activate switch. Okay. So now it will create, when we press the button, it will activate the switch. However, this could be referring to any switch, and actually right now it refers to no switch because it doesn't know what we're talking about. So back here in these, let's promote this to a variable, other actor, and we'll rename that to switch. And you can clear it in the other function if you want, just by setting it to nothing, but we don't really need to mess around with that right now. So now once we're in the overlap zone, we can get our switch, activate it, and if we're in the activation zone, branch out, true, we can activate the switch. Okay, so let's try it now and see what happens. So I'm clicking and nothing is happening, as you would expect. Now I'm in the activation zone, and the door moves. When I go click it again, it goes back to its original position. Of course, that's not really how doors tend to work. So let's make this a little bigger. And let's make its target location 100. Let's try our single use. So now it slides open. But single use is not working. Why is that? I get the feeling we didn't set used properly somewhere. No, that looks correct. Let's do a print string and a second print string. Call them A and B. So B is simply never, or A is simply never getting called. Oh. I guess we don't need single use on the, Let's try that. Okay. So I must have gotten confused somewhere while looking at my notes, because we do not need single use on yeah, we don't need it on the door itself. So we can just delete that. Whoops. Did not want to do that. Okay. So there's our single-use door. Let's try start reversed. Okay, so obviously something is not quite right there either. Well, that seems correct. Okay, so on our timeline, I set the value to 3 when the value should be 1. However, that does not mean that it is going to work any better. I think all we need to do is on begin play, a get target, get start reversed, then we're going to set reversed with that. Let's see how that goes. Fabulous. And that works fantastically. So here we have our switch. The door is starting from, let's call it the open position, since we have reversed checked, but we can uncheck that. And the door will start from the closed position. I can click this as many times as I want, but it won't interrupt the door until the door is finished moving. And I can also make this single use. So I can run up here, click this, the door is open, and nothing happens. Now what's nice about this is you can create as many children of the switched object as you want, and just by changing this function in the child, you can add whatever kinds of crazy motion or effects or whatever you want to have happen. You can change materials, you can create new actors, just anything you want Unreal to do, you know, just set it on the child actor and that will occur whenever you hit the switch. Okay, I think that should do it for this tutorial. Thanks for bearing with me as we troubleshooted that one. Let me know what you'd like me to create for you next, and that's all for now. Thanks.